Private Charles.
If you ask me, there has never been a television series that made you laugh until your sides ached and then, without any warning whatsoever, broke your heart completely in two, all within the same episode. MASH was not just a television show. It was an experience, a cultural landmark, and for millions of viewers around the world, it was appointment television like nothing that had ever come before it. So, today we are going back to the 4077th. And trust me, you are going to want to pull up a chair for this one. Hi, my name is Edward, and this is Screen Legends. Alan Alda, Captain Benjamin Hawkeye, Pierce.
Still taking a picture of a latrine. It was a trick question.
Alan Alda was born Alfonso Joseph d'Abruzzo on January 28, 1936, in the Bronx, New York City, to actor Robert Alda and dancer Joan Brown. Now, I always find it fascinating when talent runs in the family, and with Alan Alda, it absolutely did. But let me tell you something. Whatever his father gave him, Alan took it and multiplied it by about 1,000. He played the character Captain Benjamin Franklin Hawkeye Pierce in the series when he was just 36 years old in 1972. Hawkeye was the brilliant, wisecracking, martini-loving surgeon from Crabapple Cove, Maine, a man who could perform life-saving surgery under impossible conditions, deliver a perfectly timed joke in the same breath, and then turn around and deliver a monologue that would leave you absolutely gutted with emotion. He was the moral conscience of the entire 4077th. Wrapped in a Hawaiian shirt and armed with a dry wit, sharp enough to perform surgery with all on its own. No easy feat, let me tell you, but here is the thing about Alan Alda that separates him from virtually every other television star of his era. He did not just show up, say his lines, and collect his paycheck. Not even close. Alda threw himself into MASH with a creative energy and commitment that transformed the entire show from the inside out. He wrote episodes, he directed episodes, he produced. He shaped the moral and artistic direction of a series that was watched by tens of millions of people every single week, and the television industry recognized it accordingly. Alda earned an extraordinary 6 Emmy Awards across acting, writing, and directing categories, all for the same series. 6 Emmys for one show. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a record that stands to this day, and I would not bet against it standing for a very long time to come. After MASH concluded in 1983, Alda did what truly great performers always do. He kept working, kept challenging himself, and kept proving that Hawkeye Pierce, iconic as he was only one color in a very rich palette. He delivered a chilling and unforgettable supporting turn in Woody Allen's Crimes and Misdemeanors. He appeared in Martin Scorsese's The Aviator, alongside Leonardo DiCaprio. He earned yet another Emmy nomination, because of course he did, for his remarkable work as the wily Senator Arnold Vinnick in The West Wing, a role that had viewers genuinely debating whether a fictional Republican senator should win a fictional presidential election. That, my friends, is the power of Alan Alda. Then, in 2018, Alda did something that stopped the entertainment world in its tracks. He publicly disclosed that he had been living with a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease for 3.5 years. And he delivered that news with such composure, such openness, and such characteristic wit that the announcement itself became a kind of masterclass in grace under pressure. He spoke about it not to generate sympathy, but to raise awareness and to encourage others living with the disease. That is the measure of the man. Currently, Alan Alda is living at the remarkable age of 90, and he remains deeply engaged with the world through his Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science at Stony Brook University, an organization dedicated to helping scientists communicate their work more effectively to the public. Because apparently, saving the world through surgery and saving it through better science communication were both on his to-do list. A true legend, every single inch of him. Wayne Rogers, Captain Trapper John McIntyre.
Private Charles.
Wayne Rogers was born on April 7, 1933, in Birmingham, Alabama, and if you want to talk about a man who defied every expectation that was ever placed upon him, well, pull up a chair because this is a good one. He played the character Captain Trapper John McIntyre in the series when he was 39 years old in 1972. And from the very first episode, it was clear that Rogers brought something genuinely special to the role. Trapper John was Hawkeye's best friend, his surgical equal, his partner in brilliance and in mischief, and his co-conspirator in every scheme, prank, and act of beautiful insubordination that the 4077th ever produced. Where Hawkeye was volcanic and verbose, Trapper was cooler, a little more measured, a little more dangerous in that quiet way that truly confident people often are. Rogers played him with an effortless, laid-back charisma that made you feel every single time he appeared on screen that you were watching someone who was exactly where he was supposed to be. Honestly, who didn't want to be best friends with Trapper John? The man had a way about him that is genuinely difficult to describe and absolutely impossible to manufacture. Now, here is something that a lot of people either don't know or tend to forget, and I think it is one of the most fascinating behind-the-scenes stories in the entire history of MASH. Wayne Rogers departed the series after season 3, voluntarily, deliberately, and on his own terms. He walked away from one of the most popular and critically celebrated television shows on the air at the time, and he did so because he felt, with increasing frustration, that the character of Trapper John had been gradually reduced to a supporting player in Hawkeye's story, rather than a fully realized, independently compelling personality in his own right. He felt the writing had narrowed Trapper into a straight man, a reactor, a foil, and Wayne Rogers, to his enormous credit, refused to accept that. He wanted more for the character, and when it became clear he wasn't going to get it, he packed his bags. Now, walking away from one of the hottest shows on television takes either extraordinary courage, extraordinary conviction, or, and I say this with complete affection, a very, very good lawyer. Possibly all three. The producers responded famously by simply not writing Trapper John out of the show with any ceremony whatsoever. Hawkeye woke up one morning and Trapper was already gone, discharged and on his way home, leaving nothing behind but a note and a shaving kit. It was abrupt, it was slightly heartbreaking, and it was, many fans would argue, never entirely forgiven. But here is where the story of Wayne Rogers takes a turn that almost nobody saw coming. After leaving MASH, Rogers did not spend his years chasing another acting role to fill the gap. Instead, he pivoted, sharply, brilliantly, and with characteristic self-assurance, into the world of finance and investment. He became a highly successful businessman and financial analyst, eventually becoming a familiar and well-regarded face on Fox News, where he appeared regularly to offer commentary and insight on markets and economics. He also continued to act periodically in the television films and series, never entirely leaving the industry that had made him famous, but clearly no longer dependent on it for either his identity or his income. That, in its own way, is a kind of freedom that very few Hollywood careers ever produce. Sadly, Wayne Rogers passed away on December 31st, 2015, in Los Angeles, California, from complications of pneumonia. He was 82 years old. He left behind a life that was far larger and more varied than any single role could ever contain, and a performance as Trapper John McIntyre that remains, more than 50 years later, one of the most effortlessly charming in the history of American television. We miss him, we really do. Loretta Swit, Major Margaret Hot Lips, Hooligan.
Told you I was lousy.
Loretta Swit was born on November 4th, 1937 in Passaic, New Jersey, and I want to say something right up front before we go any further. Loretta Swit is, in my personal opinion, one of the most underappreciated actresses in the entire history of American television, and I will die on that hill. She played the character Major Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan in the series when she was 34 years old in 1972, and what she did with that role over 11 seasons is, frankly, extraordinary. When MASH began, Margaret Houlihan was written largely as a comic target, the rigid, regulation-obsessed head nurse whose nickname alone told you exactly how the writers initially intended her to be perceived. She was the butt of the joke, the straight-laced foil to Hawkeye's anarchic brilliance, a caricature in army fatigues. And then Loretta Swit got hold of her, and quietly, methodically, season by season, refused to let that be the whole story. She pushed. She advocated for her character's dignity. She found the vulnerability beneath the authority, the loneliness beneath the bravado, the genuine strength beneath what had previously been played purely for laughs. By the time MASH reached its final seasons, Margaret Houlihan had become one of the most fully realized and emotionally resonant characters on the entire show. That transformation did not happen by accident. It happened because Loretta Swit simply would not settle for less. The television industry noticed. She won 2 Emmy Awards for Outstanding Lead Actress in a comedy series for the role in 1980 and 1982, and both were completely and thoroughly deserved. And if that were not enough, during the actual run of the series, Swit was so in demand as a theatrical performer that she successfully negotiated a leave of absence from one of the most popular shows on television to star in the Broadway production of Same Time next year, taking a break from MASH to do Broadway. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a flex of the absolute highest order. After MASH concluded, Swit remained active across television, theater, and film, and devoted herself with tremendous passion to animal rights advocacy, a cause she has championed loudly and generously for decades. Currently, Loretta Swit is living happily at the age of 88. Hot lips, we salute you. Mesleen Stevenson, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake McLean.
Free. Well, what horse's patoot did...
Stevenson was born on November 14th, 1927, in Normal, Illinois. I have always thought it was rather poetic that a man from a town called Normal went on to play one of television's most wonderfully abnormal commanding officers. He played the character Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake in the series when he was 44 years old in 1972. Henry Blake was the bumbling, good-natured, fishing-obsessed commanding officer of the 4077th, and Stevenson played him with an infectious warmth and comedic looseness that made him absolutely irresistible. He was the kind of boss you'd actually want. Well, mostly. Stevenson made the shocking decision to leave MASH after season 3. A decision that, by his own later admission, he deeply regretted. The producers famously and brutally wrote his character out of the show by having Henry Blake's plane shot down over the Sea of Japan, a scene that left audiences devastated and remains one of the most gut-punching moments in television history. Stevenson has said in interviews that he wept when he read that script. Honestly, so did we, McLean. So did we. After leaving MASH, Stevenson struggled to recapture the same magic, cycling through several television series that failed to find an audience. Sadly, McLean Stevenson died on February 15, 1996, from a heart attack in Canoga Park, California. He was 68 years old, gone too soon and never forgotten. Larry Linville, Major Frank Burns.
Negative. Look, if I hand out AB negative, somebody...
Larry Linville was born on September 29, 1939, in Ojai, California, and I want to take a moment here to talk about something that I think gets overlooked far too often in conversations about MASH, the absolute jaw-dropping difficulty of what Larry Linville did on that show for 5 seasons. He played the character Major Frank Burns, the insufferable, cowardly, petty, self-righteous, and aggressively unpleasant antagonist of the 4077th, when he was 32 years old in 1972. And from his very first appearance, Linville committed to that character with a totality that was genuinely breathtaking to watch. Frank Burns was a snitch, a hypocrite, a bully, and a coward, often simultaneously. And Linville played every single one of those qualities without a moment's hesitation, without a wink at the audience, and without ever once asking you to feel sorry for him. He made Frank Burns completely, irredeemably, magnificently detestable. And here is the thing. That is not an insult. That is the highest possible compliment you can pay a character actor. Because making an audience genuinely dislike you, week after week, season after season, requires an enormous amount of skill, discipline, and creative courage. Any actor can play likable. Likable is easy. Likable gets you fan mail and invited to parties. Playing someone that half of America wants to reach through their television screen and shake firmly by the collar That requires something else entirely. Larry Linville had that something else in abundance. What makes his performance even more remarkable in retrospect is what we now know about the man behind the character. By every account from his castmates, his directors, and everyone who worked with him during and after MASH, Larry Linville was one of the warmest, funniest, most generous, and genuinely kind human beings ever to set foot on a Hollywood soundstage. He was, in other words, the absolute polar opposite of Frank Burns in every conceivable way. And perhaps that is precisely what made him so extraordinarily good at playing him. He understood the character from the outside, with a clarity and a distance that allowed him to inhabit the ugliness without ever being consumed by it. After 5 seasons, Linville made the decision to leave MASH, a brave and remarkably self-aware choice driven by his recognition that Frank Burns had been taken as far as the character could credibly go, and that continuing risked locking him permanently into a box defined entirely by cowardice and pettiness. He walked away on his own terms and spent the years that followed working steadily and happily in theater and television, building a body of work that deserved far more attention than it typically received. Sadly, Larry Linville passed away on April 10, 2000 in New York City from complications related to cancer. He was just 60 years old. 60, far, far too young, and a loss that the entertainment world felt more deeply than it perhaps adequately expressed at the time. He gave us one of television's truly great villains. The very least we can do is remember him for it. Gary Berghoff, Corporal Radar. O'Reilly.
Are you kidding? My palms are sweating off. I'm afraid to...
Gary Berghoff was born on May 24, 1943, in Bristol, Connecticut. And if you want to talk about a performer who walked onto a television set and immediately instinctively made every single person watching feel something warm and protective and genuinely tender, well, Gary Berghoff is your man. He played the character Corporal Walter Radar O'Reilly in the series when he was 29 years old in 1972. And here is a piece of trivia that I never get tired of sharing. Gary Berghoff was the only member of the entire MASH television cast to reprise his role directly from Robert Altman's original 1970 film. Every other cast member was new to the 4077th. Berghoff walked in already knowing exactly who Radar was because he had already lived inside that character once before, and it showed from the very first frame. Radar O'Reilly was, on the surface, a fairly simple character. A young, sweet, slightly naive company clerk from Ottumwa, Iowa, who carried a teddy bear, drank grape knee-high soda, and possessed the seemingly supernatural ability to hear incoming helicopters before anyone else on the base had detected so much as a whisper of rotor blades in the distance. He was the youngest soul in a place defined by its proximity to death and suffering, and he retained that innocence with a stubborn, unconscious grace that made him, episode after episode, the emotional anchor of the entire show. Sweet, quietly indispensable, and possessed of a decency so genuine it almost hurt to watch. Rather like a good cup of coffee, really. You didn't always stop to appreciate it, but you would have noticed immediately and painfully if it wasn't there. What Berghoff did with that character went far beyond simply playing sweet. He found the complexity inside the simplicity. He found the homesickness, the confusion, the slow and reluctant growing up that Radar was forced to do whether he wanted to or not. And the television industry recognized it in the most concrete way available to them. Berghoff won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series in 1977, becoming the only performer in the entire run of MASH to win an acting Emmy in a supporting category, the only one. Out of an ensemble that included some of the finest television actors of their generation. Let that sit for just a moment. He left the series after season 8, citing exhaustion and a profound desire to spend more time with his family. A decision that his castmates received with nothing but understanding and respect. After MASH, Berghoff stepped quietly and deliberately away from the Hollywood spotlight, turning his attention to the passions that had always mattered most to him outside of acting, painting detailed and beautiful wildlife art, and fishing, which he has transformed over the years into something of a genuine second career through television appearances and heartfelt personal advocacy for environmental conservation. Currently, Gary Berghoff is living at the age of 82, and by all accounts is doing wonderfully and peacefully. Radar, we always knew you were something special. We still do. Harry Morgan, Colonel Sherman T. Potter. Harry Morgan was born Harry Bratsburg on April 10, 1915, in Detroit, Michigan. He played the character Colonel Sherman T. Potter, the replacement commanding officer who arrived in Season 4 following McLean Stevenson's departure when he was already 60 years old in 1975. And here is a fun piece of trivia for you. Harry Morgan actually appeared in MASH before joining the cast permanently, playing a completely different character, a slightly unhinged general, in a Season 3 episode. Only in Hollywood, ladies and gentlemen. Colonel Potter was everything Henry Blake was not. A career military man, steady, shrewd, and possessed of a wonderful crotchety dignity. Morgan played him with such warmth and authority that many fans consider Potter their favorite commanding officer of the entire series. High praise, given the competition. Morgan won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a comedy series in 1980 for the role, a thoroughly deserved recognition of a performance that anchored the entire back half of the show. After MASH, Morgan continued acting prolifically into his 80s, with notable appearances in Dragnet and dozens of other television projects. Sadly, Harry Morgan passed away on December 7, 2011, at his home in Los Angeles, California, from pneumonia. He was 96 years old. 96. The man did everything right. David Ogden Stiers, Major Charles Emerson, Winchester III.
Pure adventuresome fun of a first-rate Captain Mal.
David Ogden Stiers was born on October 31st, 1942, in Peoria, Illinois. He played the character Major Charles Emerson, Winchester III, the pompous, brilliant, surprisingly tender Boston Brahmin surgeon who replaced Frank Burns as the show's resident antagonist when he was 34 years old when he joined the series in 1977. Now, replacing Frank Burns was always going to be a tall order. And yet Stiers did something remarkable. He made Winchester a completely different kind of foil. Where Burns was petty and stupid, Winchester was genuinely brilliant, just insufferable about it. A crucial distinction. Winchester became one of the most surprisingly layered characters in the show's history, with episodes devoted to his love of classical music, his complicated relationship with his family, and his moments of unexpected and deeply moving humanity. Stiers played every note of it, pun entirely intended, with exquisite skill. After MASH, Stiers had a remarkably diverse career, including extensive voice work for Disney animated films and a long-running role on the series Married to the Children. Wait, I mean Boston Legal, forgive me. Major Winchester would never forgive that error. Sadly, David Ogden Stiers passed away on March 3rd, 2018, in Newport, Oregon, from bladder cancer. He was 75 years old, a singular talent who deserved every accolade he received. Jamie Farr, Corporal Maxwell Q. Klinger. Jamie Farr was born Jamil Joseph Farah on July 1st, 1934, in Toledo, Ohio. He played the characters Corporal Maxwell Q. E. Klinger, the lovable Lebanese-American soldier from Toledo, who spent the entire series attempting to get a Section 8 discharge by wearing women's clothing. When he was 38 years old in 1972. And here is something wonderful. Jamie Farr was originally hired for a single episode. One episode. The character was so beloved by audiences that he became a series regular, and Klinger endured all the way through to the final episode. Never underestimate a man in a dress. That is the lesson here. Farr, himself a Korean War veteran, brought a genuine authenticity and affection to the role that elevated what could have been a simple running gag into something genuinely touching. By the end of the series, Klinger had become the company clerk, Radar's permanent replacement, and had fallen in love and married a Korean woman, choosing to stay behind after the war. It is one of the show's most quietly beautiful character arcs. After MASH, Farr continued working steadily in television, theater, and game shows, remaining one of the most cheerful and gregarious members of the MASH family at every reunion and retrospective. Currently, Jamie Farr is living happily at the age of 91. based in his beloved hometown of Toledo, Ohio. Some people never forget where they came from, and Jamie Farr is proudly one of them. William Christopher, father Francis John Patrick Mulcahy. William Christopher was born on October 20th, 1932, in Evanston, Illinois. He played the character Father Francis John Patrick Mulcahy, the gentle, eternally patient, morally steadfast Catholic chaplain of the 4077th. When he was 39 years old in 1972, Father Mulcahy was the conscience of the camp in a different way from Hawkeye, quieter, more patient, more forgiving. The kind of person who made everyone around him want to be slightly better than they actually were. We could all use a Father Mulcahy in our lives, I think. Christopher was, by every account from his castmates, one of the most genuinely kind and decent human beings ever to work in Hollywood. He and his wife Peg devoted enormous personal resources and energy to the care of their son Ned, who was autistic. And Christopher became an important early advocate for autism awareness long before it entered the mainstream conversation. After MASH ended, Christopher continued acting in television and theater, and participated warmly in MASH reunions and retrospectives over the years. Sadly, William Christopher passed away on December 31st, 2016 in Pasadena, California from lung cancer. He was 84 years old. The world was quieter and a little less kind without him in it. And there you have it, friends. The remarkable cast of MASH, then and now, in 2026. What a group of human beings. What a show. You know, when you sit with all of these stories together, the triumphs, the losses, the lives lived with such richness and purpose both on and off that screen, it reminds you of exactly why MASH was never really just a television series. It was a mirror held up to the best and worst of the human condition, and the people who made it were worthy of every moment of it. To those we have lost, Wayne Rogers, McLean Stevenson, Larry Linville, Harry Morgan, David Ogden Stiers, and William Christopher, thank you. And to those still with us, Alan Alda, Loretta Swit, Gary Berghoff, and Jamie Farr, thank you too. We are still watching, we are still laughing, we are still occasionally weeping just a little. Now, I want to hear from you. Who was your favorite character from MASH? Was it Hawkeye's brilliance, Radar's sweetness, Klinger's spectacular wardrobe choices? Let me know in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this video, please do hit that like button, subscribe to Screen Legends, and ring that bell notification so you never miss a single episode. Until next time, I'm Edward, and this has been Screen Legends.